this is a technology that really can give you vast increases in efficiency and ultimately that much better customer experience if you nail it all.
Welcome to Always on CIC, the show for contact center and IT leaders. Between helping support your contact center reps, your customers, and the tech that makes the contact center function, you're relied upon quite a lot. You can't afford for your customer experience, employee experience, or stability of the contact center to falter. If you're ready to find the next strategy to keep your customer employee experience always on, let's get into this episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Always on CIC. Today we have John Wesselman on the show, one of our contact center experts here at AudioCodes. John's been in the UC and contact center industry for over 2 decades and years of hands-on experience with contact center call flows. This episode is going to be very tactical, so stick around till the end. John has a lot to share with us, so let's jump into the conversation. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was excited when you agreed to come on. We had your counterpart, Oren Bachelor, come on a couple months ago, and he shared a lot about IVR design as well. We got a lot of good feedback from the episode, so wanted to have a similar type of conversation specific to call flows with you. I know you're an expert there, and think we have a lot of insight that would be valuable for listeners. So I wanted to kick things off and talk, kind of high level of what is a call flow. So maybe can you give us an example of how a call flow works and just kind of an elementary definition of what is a call flow?
Sure. So a call flow is essentially a map or a diagram of a call path as the call goes from the beginning to the end of the call, from the moment that the caller dials the call, as it routes through the system, delivered to the actual agent that they speak with, and to the end of that call. So we're defining all the steps that are going to take place as the call progresses. That includes the when of a call. When are we going to route it to a contact center agent versus routing it to an after hours message option, as an example. Then you have elements that make up the call flow that are going to be decision points or points to gather information potentially from the caller. That's the what of it. What are we going to do with that caller while we have them on the line? Then we have the where. Where are we going to send this call now that we've gathered the right information or know maybe who we're talking to? Or maybe it's just time to get someone quickly to an agent. So we're going to route them to an agent in a formal queue. Are we going to route them to a hunt group or give them some other automated experience potentially? And then we're going to define the how, the agent experience and the customer experience. What do we want our agents to have in front of them to do their job effectively? And then what experience ultimately do we want for that customer? Again, whether there's automated elements that they're going to hear before an agent or the actual time that they spend with the agent working through the issue. All those things have to be thought through, and that essentially makes up that call flow.
Yeah. Love this. Okay. So if I were to repeat that back to you, it sounds like there's 4 core elements when you're designing it, or what is in a call flow. You're thinking about when it's happening, what is going to happen, where that call is going, and how it's going to be delivered to the agent.
Correct.
Yeah. And it seems like I also like this approach because you're thinking also from the agent experience. A lot of times the call flow is, we're thinking very focused on the caller and what they're experiencing, but it's also important for the agent and what they're experiencing on their side when receiving the call.
Yeah, especially in this day and age where we have access to so much information and the ability to easily tap into that information using APIs, we can supercharge that agent's experience so that they know exactly who they're speaking with, the nature of why that caller's calling. And even with these tools, we can start to feed them potentially information that says, they're calling about this. This is the 3rd time they've called. Let's recommend this solution for them. So you can start to add that intelligence as AI continues to make its way into the contact center.
Yeah.
So it's really, again, helping that agent have all the tools that they need to do their job most effectively.
Definitely. I love this. Okay. So at a high level, it can sound like quite a lot. And I know previously when we were talking about this topic, you were talking a lot about call flow coordination. Creating a call flow requires a coordination from a lot of different people and systems. You just talked about integrating APIs and AI and all these things into the call flow. How do you bring everyone into or onto the same page when designing the call flow?
Well, and I think that can be a lot of the challenge that often gets overlooked by those that may not have done anything like this, is that you have to pull information from a number of resources to really have that cohesive design, to have it doing all of the things we may want it to do throughout the process. Because even if it's a 3-minute call, may be some essential elements in there that we use to remedy the issue, to potentially position new products to that customer. So there's a lot of ways that you can leverage this, as well as having a wealth of information just for reporting, so that we can see trends, we can see performance metrics, agent by agent, queue by queue.
Hmm.
So it really does give you that insight. So in order to have all that information kind of assembled in the right way, we have to take into consideration, first of all, the phone system. How are we going to deliver these calls to the agents? What's their vehicle to answer that interaction? So we have to make sure that the phone system is capable of doing what we want it to do, or if it's part of a migration, that it's going to be compatible with what our next solution is going to look like.
Yeah.
Also, we're going to have to look at system requirements. Do we have the proper network infrastructure, the proper desktop computers for the agents to do this? So we have to take that factor that into account. So we've already incorporated telecommunications professionals, the IT professionals. We also have to look at the security requirements, because we are accessing various systems of data. There's CRM or ticketing systems at play. So we have to look at maybe a developer resource within the company that may have to do some interactive integration elements there. And then there's the functional needs. We need to talk to the contact center manager to make sure, do we have all of the tools that their agents need to do their job effectively, that the supervisors have what they need to have the visibility and control that they need, and then do the agents have access to the tools to be able to effectively handle that interaction. And then last part of that would be, are we also going to consider taking omni-channel interactions? We're going to go beyond just voice interactions and start doing web chats, email interactions, SMS interactions that are all going to come into that contact center and be distributed just the same as phone calls would.
Yeah.
And I would say that very last consideration is finance. We have to pay for all of this. So we have to get buy-in from the finance department and make sure that they're on board with the investment that we're making in this element of our company.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. So I'll second notes on that. I have
I
I have
intentionally tried to make that sound daunting.
I have
Just
six
off the
different departments. Yeah. IT, security, developers, contact center manager, agent, finance department. That is quite a group when you're creating, when you're looking to create these call flows, or say, if you're a listener, you don't have more of like a formal contact center yet, and you're maybe in the buying process or something like that, and you need to determine who to bring into the conversations. I mean, these 6 different departments are all going to have some type of foot in the door when it comes to the contact center, especially the call flow.
Right.
Um,
And mind you, that may not be 6 individual departments in a company. It may be one person that wears 2 or 3 of those hats, but
yeah.
all those factors do need to be taken into consideration, because they will impact where that application lives in the organization and how
Mhm.
it's going to function and interplay with other aspects of the organization.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we have, quite a bit of people involved in the call flow. You're able to give us, what are the different steps of the call flow when it comes to the when, what, where, and how, and who needs to be involved when creating it. I wanted to get a little bit more tactical on like a walkthrough of how you would create one. So can you walk us through like a 5-step process of creating a call flow? And if you're a listener, where should they start?
The first place to start is, what is that customer experience? Since this is a customer facing tool, we want to make sure that we're designing it in a way that gives the customer experience that we want. So if that's give exceptional service, what does it take to give that exceptional service through this approach, through this system?
Hmm.
So the customer experience being essential to that. Second, I would say, let's take into consideration integration needs. What systems do we need? And again, we're coming to the agent side, to give that agent the access to the information, to the resources, to screen pops, the actual tools that they're using while they're handling that interaction, so that they have the information, they have the resources, and the ability to resolve that issue on the first call. And also with that, taking into consideration all the system needs. So that would be the third point, is Do we have the infrastructure that we need, or are we going to have to bolster that infrastructure to make sure that it accommodates all the different technology elements we're going to be factoring in as part of this call flow in this contact center solution? Then I would say determining what prompts, taking into consideration all possible iterations, what may occur in a call. It's easy to think of the things that we can readily think of, the question we want to ask, and what's the answer if they say the optimal answer. But sometimes we don't get the answer that we expect, so we have to design it to accommodate for mistakes, errors. We didn't capture data, so we have to ask again.
Yeah.
So all of those things need to be factored in to make sure that the flow is complete. And then I would say, lastly, test, test, test. We want to make sure we test it thoroughly, make any adjustments that are needed, because this is a live customer-facing element once you make it active. So you
Yeah.
want to make sure that it's reflecting the professionalism that you want from your company.
hmm I had a question related to prompts. How do you know what type of prompts or elements to have in the call tree? So, say you're starting out and you're creating a call tree from scratch. This is the first one that's being created at the organization. How do you
Mhm.
know what are, I guess, some of the basic level ones you should have in the call tree starting out?
So you're going to have your basic greetings. That's going to be the, thank you for calling kind of messages. You're going to have things like disclosures. Maybe you're required to record calls and hold them for a certain amount of time. So you want to obviously let your caller know we may be recording this call.
hmm
Also, things like menuing and messaging, or music and messaging on hold. So
Yeah.
you have this audience that's in your queue, sort of a captive audience. Some customers will use that as an opportunity to give them advertising or give them valuable information, or maybe even instructions on common troubleshooting steps they can take to maybe not have to wait for that agent completely. So there's a lot of value you can get out of making sure those messages are worded properly. You also want to make sure that they're not excessively long, and that
hmm
you've got callers that just have to wait to listen to the entire message. So you just want to put a lot of thought into the greetings that you're putting in place, so that again they're instructive, they're informative, and the caller always kind of knows where they stand as it relates to the call.
Okay. Cool. I had another follow up question on that, and your second point was on integrations.
Mhm.
What are maybe like 2 or 3 integrations that should be pretty standard in every call flow?
So when we think of the systems that we're typically integrating with in a contact center, it's going to fall into two categories. It's either going to usually be a customer relationship management database or a CRM like Salesforce.com, or it's going to be a ticketing system or some other functional system that is used to facilitate processes through a company. So a ticketing system to facilitate the closure of that ticket, ordering system to track the order and make sure that that gets delivered on time, and
Mm.
the where is it element to things. So whatever the system might be, it gives you the ability to tap into that information both in the front end for the customer in an automated fashion. Give me your account number and I'll tell you what your balance is, for example,
Yeah.
or to help to route that call to the right team. So they've entered their ticket number. I can see that it's a hardware related issue. Let's route that to the hardware team so that they
Mm.
can handle it, as opposed to some other team that maybe isn't equipped to answer that type of interaction as effectively.
Okay.
So it does give you the ability to use that information to effectively route the call and provide information back to the caller.
Okay. I love this. All right. So just to recap on the 5 steps there, first we're thinking about customer experience. The second thing we're thinking about are the integrations. And you were just explained that really well as far as, a ticketing system, CRM, these type of integrations are going to be perfect for a call flow. And the third thing is the agent experience. And it seems like the agent experience can flow really well back to the integrations and CRM and ticketing when the agent has a ability to see the customer's information within the CRM when they're speaking to the customer, or they're able to see within a ticketing system directly, say ServiceNow, where a ticket stands. Is it resolved? Is it stuck somewhere in the flow? That can help the agent experience quite a lot in being able to have that information right there and available to them. I think the fourth thing you mentioned were the prompts. What are the messages that you are giving to a caller. Maybe when they're on hold, it's a good time to add in some advertising. There's obviously hold music, but along with that, you can add in advertising, or if there's some type of, maybe there is a system that's down, that's a good time to announce that type of
Mhm.
message as well. And the last thing you
An
mentioned was,
example I frequently use in my demonstrations is calling into your broadband provider. Almost everyone will have some sort of message that says, if you haven't tried resetting your router, try that because it fixes a big percentage of the problems. So
definitely.
anything like that where you can circumvent otherwise time that would be tied up with an agent to get them their answer and kind of help them fix themselves, that's kind of where that automation element or the concept of automating functions inside
Mhm.
of your call flow would
Yeah,
comes into play.
definitely. It's another type of self-service as well. You can self-service through FAQs on the website, but also self-servicing through in messages or prompts while someone is on hold. Great
Mhm,
example. And the fifth one was test. And I want to jump into testing a little bit more, especially around maybe testing sensitive data. If we have a listener
mhm.
who is, you gave the bank example. Obviously, there's a lot of sensitive data involved in banking and for the customer's information. So, how would you test a call flow if you're handling sensitive data during that call flow?
So it really comes down to the design to make sure that sensitive data is data that can be shared, and how we're going to do that through the call flow. So we need to determine what information we're going to provide to that customer, the caller. Is it something we can share per our compliance? So if it's healthcare and HIPAA requirements, I have to be very careful about what information I share, that I'm sharing it with a person that's appropriate. So one way I can validate that would be through unique identifiable information, an account number, a patient ID, a order number, really anything depending on what the nature of the call is. I
Mhm.
can use that information to again get the follow-up information behind that. But accessing that information needs to also be secure. So I need to take into consideration any kind of security standards to properly authenticate myself to that data so that whatever information I'm retrieving in an authorized manner.
Mhm. Okay. Now, if someone is wanting to test this type of call flow before it is live and in an actual environment where it would be with a real caller, how would they test it beforehand?
As simple as making some phone calls, but that would be the one aspect of it.
Mhm.
Functionally, does it work? It might also make sense to have a few people doing it to put a little bit of a load on it. So you're load testing and functional testing at the same time. Making notes, obviously, as you're going through the test process to identify little changes you may want to make in the flow, and doing it obviously in a non-live environment if you can beforehand, putting a
Yeah.
test number against it before you make it live for your customers. Yeah, so testing every feature and testing it very thoroughly is tantamount to making sure that it's successful.
So on a tactical level, you could create maybe a fake ID or a fake customer account within your CRM or whatever customer data
Mhm.
platform that you're using, and then have create a call flow that is going to retrieve that fake ID and have multiple people say on your team call that number and try to retrieve that information within a similar time frame.
Exactly. Is the caller getting the information that we've determined they should get through whatever automated functionalities? Is the agent receiving on their screen the information we need them to have, whatever fields of information we need them to know, or the actual record in a screen pop?
Mhm.
And those things really make the system work or not work depending on how well they're designed. So testing not only the technical features but also the functional aspects of those features is
Yeah.
a very important piece.
Yeah, this is really good. I think it seems like the testing theme has come up quite a lot in our conversation. It's really important because, if you're not testing it and there is a bug or there's an issue in the call flow, you're potentially already getting a customer on the phone who might be a little irritated already. And if there's something that's
Mhm.
broken in that call flow or there's not correct information being flowing back in, it could just add a little bit more to that agitation.
Not
um,
only that, this may be one of those rare times that the customer actually interfaces with the company.
Yeah.
only when they have this issue. So you want to put your best foot forward as the vendor to
Hmm.
reflect you're professional, you're efficient, we've got you taken care of. That's the message I want to convey to my customers if they call into my contact center, right?
Yeah.
So you do have to put a lot of thought into how these are designed, that you're wording things the right way, and that it flows through as efficiently as possible so they're getting a quick response as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. This is good stuff. John, I want to take us to the next part of our conversation, and that is around some common mistakes. What are the common mistakes you're seeing in the call flow design process, and how would you advise avoiding them?
Sure. I would say one of the most frustrating things that callers face is the experience of excessively long prompts. They have to listen to a 3-minute message before they can even do anything. Thought needs to be put into that to make sure that those kind of situations don't exist. You don't want to give them 9 options because how are they going to remember the first couple options by the time they've got to 8 or 9? Keep them very succinct. And if you need to have that many options, break it up. Find a way to subcategorize that and then give them options and then smaller options. That's one. That's a very easy one. Then you have query loops. You don't want to have a lot of looping where you're getting customers stuck into a cycle they can't get out of. So you have to be mindful of that as you're designing it. Also, making changes on the fly. I'm a big fan of the testing and validating, less so of let's roll the dice and make this big change live.
Yeah.
That's a little too scary for me. So I say that would be a mistake to do that. I would suggest vetting things out, testing it in an isolated environment instead of doing it on the fly and live, unless you absolutely have to.
Hmm.
And then not defining all those scenarios. So kind of going back to that first topic we talked about, not having things defined if they we don't get the response that we're looking for. And then it's confusing for the caller because they wouldn't know what to do. So you want to make sure you have all of those aspects thought through and not leave confusion points for that caller to experience.
Okay. What is a query loop? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So a query loop would be where I've maybe not gotten the response, so I want to ask them again. I need to make sure that that's designed in an effective way to where they don't get stuck in that loop, that
Mm.
there are exit points to get them to maybe we recognize it's third time we've tried this and it didn't work, so let's move them to another phase of this or directly to an agent because we're not getting the information that we need.
Yeah.
A lot of ways we can address it, but making sure that if we have those scenarios, that there are ways to get out of cyclical questions and queries.
Yeah. What's one way that that could be addressed? What's one thing that comes top to mind for that?
They're usually going to exist as a result of having a question where maybe I didn't get an answer, so I need to tell the system to ask that question again. Just keep in mind as you're designing your call flow, if you have something like that, to put some sort of a counter in place so that I only ask it a certain number of times, 3 times before I move them on to the next step. After a handful of times, if you're not getting the information you need, it's probably best to get them to an agent anyway. So just taking those things into account so that again, you're not having a customer stuck in one place and not able to get out of it.
Hmm. Gotcha. So it's putting an identifier in the amount of times you're going to ask that certain question without
Correct.
getting an answer is probably going to be the best way to avoid those query loops.
Yeah, and most systems have the capability to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, last piece and last question is going to be more advice related. So, what's one piece of advice you would give to listeners who want to create and test a call flow tomorrow?
Preparation is key. That's number one. Making sure that you've kind of done the homework. I mean, it is an essential part of again that first impression of a lot of callers that they're going to get, or maybe the only impression this year is the time
Mhm.
they call in the support. So you want to put a lot of thought and planning to make sure that you're giving that experience. It's not uncommon when I'm doing a proof of concept with customers where maybe they haven't thought through this a lot and
Yeah.
they're often kind of taken aback by all the things they have to take into consideration. Well, just by kind of mapping it out, you really these things start to uncover themselves and it starts to make a lot more sense.
Hmm.
Another very essential part is getting buy-in from all of the key stakeholders. As we talked about in the first topic, there can be a lot of departments that could be involved in this potentially, depending on how large the company is. And it's a lot of buy in that you have to get. But it's important to do that because you are touching many systems and many aspects of the company. But again, it's about that customer experience, so it's a very important thing. And then be prepared to adjust as needed. You're not likely going to nail it the first time out of the box. You may find different questions that you want to ask, or you've uncovered a perfect automation point. So
Mhm.
we want to incorporate that automation into the call flow now.
Yeah.
So be willing to adjust it as needed, but then also try to think outside of the box on what new elements can we incorporate in to make that experience even better for the callers.
Yeah. I actually had a one last question is, would it be worth maybe calling into some other customer service lines that you're a customer of to get a good idea or example of how they are running their call flows?
Absolutely, absolutely. So not only contact centers that you admire. I've listened to a call flow that I thought was just great. I want to
Mhm.
take some notes out of that. That's a great way to get an idea of what you want to accomplish. Calling your bank is a great example because you're getting automated systems throughout those calls typically.
Yeah.
Also, what's your competition doing?
Mhm.
Are they using some technology that maybe is giving them an edge in the market? Or maybe that's your advantage that you want to take. You want to have the best technology. So you want to make sure that you're going above and beyond where your competition sits.
Yeah.
Everybody's a little different in their approach to that, but this is a technology that really can give you vast increases in efficiency and ultimately that much better customer experience if you nail it all. So
Yeah.
that's something, again, that's by being willing to adjust things and being flexible, you'll have that in mind and again, trying to adapt it for that ultimate customer experience.
Mhm. Oh, I love
I
this.
would say the last thing would be measurability. I want to have as much measurability in my contact center as possible. Reports on agents, reports on queues. If I can get feedback from customers by way of surveys or other feedback that I might allow them to provide to the contact center, making sure that we have some sort of a closed loop in place to not only receive the information, but let's learn from it. Let's implement things to, take that feedback into account.
Okay. Good, good. So it sounds like if there's one thing that you could maybe do tomorrow, it would be to call your bank. Or maybe not even your bank, but call a competitor or call another organization that you're a customer of. Get an idea of what their call flow sounds like. If it's a
Mhm.
good one, take some notes. Take some notes, and that can then begin the preparation phase of what you want your call flows to look like, and then
Absolutely.
progress into the stakeholders and who you need to have conversations with. Awesome, John. This is so good. Thank you for joining us today. You're all the experience you have. I mean, you're in this day to day when it comes to call flows. So, really appreciate your time with us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining today, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye, y'all. Thank you for listening to this episode of Always on CXCX. If you learned one thing from this episode, we'd appreciate if you'd subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. If you're using Microsoft Teams and are looking to integrate a contact center, consider trying Voca for free for 30 days. Voca is built on Microsoft Azure, meaning your customer interactions start, stay, and end with the same reliability and 5.9 uptime as Microsoft Teams. Just Google AudioCodes Voca or find the link in the show notes. Thank you again for tuning into this episode of Always on CXCX. We'll see you in the next one.